Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Um, my name is Peter Bajo. I hail from Tatale in the northern region of Ghana, that is Tatale-Sangul district. My hometown is Dondoni, that is a village and the district. I think that my coming on this platform today is to be able to introduce some of the topics and open up for discussion, and also to bring us some of the facts that have been lingering on for some time now, especially regarding my people, the Konkomba tribe. Before I move on, I would like to extend my greetings to my families, wherever they are, and friends, and to dedicate this presentation to my wife, Georgina Tani Magadle, from Nabdo, Nyojado, also in the same district. My children, Kafanyake Bajo, Ndemwa Bajo, and Belanga Bajo. And to all my siblings, and my parents as well, and all my uncles. I would also like to thank my uncle, one Mr. Tadi, I will not mention the full name, but he knows himself, for his encouragement and guidance in all that I do. I am grateful to all of you. This topic is going to be about the history of the Konkomba people. It is not going to go as far beyond 1884 backwards, because many scholars and historians, both Konkombas and non-Konkombas alike, have spoken and written extensively about who Konkombas are. I have listened to all the arguments. Their presentations are factual, and they are right. So I am not going to waste time on this going back beyond 1884. The reason why I am coming up at this time is that there has been a lot of agitation, a lot of misconception about the Konkomba people and where we come from. People refer to us as Togolese. There was a recent video from Atabobo constituency during the 2020 elections in Ghana, where a chief was alleged to have said that the Konkombas are very bad people, and that was why their four fingers, I don't know which of them he was referring to, was amputated. He did not really tell whether the Konkomba people were stealing, whether they were murderers, or whatever. It is as a result of all these misconceptions that I felt it necessary, or I thought it wise, to come out to clear the air, so that those who do not know the history of Konkombas should not think that we are aliens to Ghana. And if I will refer to the country Ghana, Ghana is just a baby. I am not old enough in a way. I'm almost 50 years old. Ghana is 64, so Ghana should be older than me about 16 years. So, if my father were to be alive today, he would have been over 70 years old. So definitely he's older than Ghana, or he was older than Ghana. My grandfather, my late grandfather, was older than Ghana. There's no doubt about that. So, who are Ghanaians? Where I was born, that's where my father was born. That's where my grandfather was born. So if Ghana is only 64 years old, and we have lived there since time immemorial, and we are still living there, who tells who a Ghanaian is? Now, having said that, I'm not going to say or pretend that I know everything about the Konkomba history, because a lot has been said. I am only going to bring a segment of what I know, what I've heard, and what I have seen. And to let people know where I come from or where I am coming from in terms of my educational level. Most friends and maybe my people that have heard this story over and over from me again have encouraged me to write a book. I've always told them that, well, maybe you do not know me well, you thought you did, because I do not have what it takes to put a book together at this point, because I do not have that intellectual ability or educated highly enough to put a book together. Maybe as time goes on, my friends and children will help me, my family will help me do that. I'm looking forward to that day. So now, to be frank with you, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a PhD holder, no, or I am a doctorate holder, no. In fact, I don't even have a 4-year college degree. I may have had a lot of diplomas from other fields of endeavors, but I do not have a 4-year college degree. And I want people to judge me during this presentation as somebody who has the knowledge of the history, not that type of the academician or somebody who has been a scholar of some sort, but what I live in, what I heard, and where I hail from, the much history that we have, that I'm going to put in this presentation. There shall not be insult in this. Hard criticisms, yes, I will criticize where the need be, but I will not insult anybody. And at the end of this presentation, I will lay my information out there for people who want to contact me, either by way of interview or interaction. I'll be ready and looking forward to doing that with you. Now, if we say the Konkombas, and I said a little about the history, maybe not too much, but just not being Ghanaians per se, is what I'm coming down to. So where I come from in the northern region, as I've mentioned earlier, which is part of Ghana today, was not known as Sangul. It was known as Toba. And to move on, if I do not refer to certain things, people might not get where I'm coming from. For example, Professor Lumumba said a lot of the white people were here in Africa. The Belgians, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and a whole lot of them looking for their share. That is true. But none of them were able to get to the territory of the Konkomba land, where I refer to as the Konkomba land, which I'll tell you in brief. None of them. It was only the Germans in the 1884 that way that they came. And when they arrived, they were somewhere in the Lomé-Kara area of the Plateau region. They never got to our area that easily. So if I say the Konkomba land, I'm referring to that aspect where we now have Togo and Ghana combined. Those who know the area very well will realize that it spans from that place across the Little River towards non-Togo area, Ibubo, Nandetao, Mpenta, which they call in Togolese French, Patabo, Kejabong, Kuka. And then you cross the Upper Volta, which is now River Oti, to Chabob area, where people call Sabuba. I don't know what Sabuba means, but the name is Chabob. So go through Wapul, where they call Wapule, all that way through to Umbung area. You will come back to Chabo area, then you go through the Palba Road. On that enclave, you will find Konkul, Nalo. You will find Palam. You will find Chagbang. You will find Kotul. And a whole lot of Konkomo communities that you may not be able to mention. We have Kucha and Sambol to the east by the river, Oti. And when you cross over that river, you go to Pabuan, Chal, Kunga, Kumpam, Posa, Nandatab, Kujabong all the way through Kuka. Then you now come over River Npunji. That is Nambong, now in Ghana. Those middle areas belt that I mentioned are in Togo now. There was nothing like Togo. There was nothing like Togoland. In fact, I do not know how that enclave or the area was called, but I know it was Konkomba land, and it is a Konkomba land still. There's no doubt about that. And so you come through Nambong. You will have, that time, the Sangul area that I talk about was Toba. So the Toba comprises of that area I'm talking about, Moatong, Nambong, Wabine. You have, what do you call it, Yalanke. Then all the way through Sachilbu area, then you come to Nabdo, where they now call Nahunyele, Mpangani area, Jambone. All these communities, they are still available and still under the same name. Nabdo that they call Nahunyele is Nabdo. And they adopted it in the Gbani to be Nahunyele. No. Then you come down through Nangparabutabo, Chakundu area, through Bukbajab. Then you come to Yachuri area, Nanjirdo. You go through Nyoni area, through Benland, or you go back to, what do you call it, Bisayim. Then you go back to Tatundo. There you find Sangul and Pel today. You find Pejul, you find Nkpane. Then you come to Dondone. Now we share a border with the Basaris over there. You have Tatale town itself. You have Panjali, which is now in Togo. You have Basa. You have Kab. Then you now come through, before you go to Yajol, which is now Zabzogo. You branch to Sende area, where they now call Sheni. Sende is a Basari or Kokoma community. The name Sende means to steam. To steam. That is Sende. And now they now turn it to be Sheni to suit somebody else's interest. Then from there, you pass through Sangba area, you go to Nachinde area, then you go to Najayondo, all the way through that side. You could pass Nabukora, and then you go to Tinjas area, all the way through to Paza area. These were Konkomba occupations, Konkomba lands, and they are still Konkomba lands. There was nothing like German Togo land, or French Togo land, or British Togo land. That was later, and that was yesterday. You see? So there was no white man in that enclave. But this history that I'm going to talk about, I am not going to go beyond the current Sangul area, because I might not have the information I need in this presentation to talk about Chabo area, which is Sabuba. There are a lot of professors and scholars there that have made the position clear and laid down the facts, which I believe to be true. They are very factual. There's no doubt about that. You see? So now that we have been told that we do not have land, I am going to tell you why we are now called Togolese. And I made it clear before that there was no Togo, there was no Togoland, there was no Ghana. So I just want a scholar or a historian who will be honest enough to tell me how, or the name that was given to that enclave, which is now known as part of Togo today and Ghana today. Before the Germans arrived there, somebody can tell me the name. But I know that these were Konkomo lands, and they still remain Konkomo lands. They have never been occupied by any other tribe other than Konkombas and Basaris. So why are we always called landless, stateless, and chiefless? For the purposes of this video, or this presentation, it will not be, it would have been very long, but I'm going to call this part one. And when this comes out somewhere, we could have a discussion. And then we could go to the index of the second part of the presentation. So now, I'm going to tell you when the Germans arrived in our vicinity. And that was after 1884 that way. And in actual fact, we, like they said, chiefless societies, we were not practicing chieftaincy. This is a foreign culture. It was brought by the Germans and the like, because they practiced that in Europe and the Queensland in Britain. They know all that. It wasn't our thing. We do the Utinda, we do Unonkbel, and the like. We didn't know that. But when it came and it was imposed or introduced to our people, we embraced it. We embraced it. And we were part of it. So we cannot be called chiefless anymore. So history has it that, oral history has it that, when the Germans first came to the top area where I mentioned earlier in Lomenkara, they were in that area and wanted to advance towards the Konkomba land that I mentioned earlier, in the present-day Sangul and a place known as Ibubo, which I'll tell you why it is called Ibubo, or it was called and still called Ibubo. See, in 1987, my father had earlier on listened to some of these oral stories from the most elderly people in the area, and thought that since I was interested, it would be an opportunity for me to meet one of them, to hear the true story. So in 1987, I think I was about getting into the Form 4 in middle school, and we had gone to one Uncle Tayar, who took us to one of the oldest person who was blind and laying on his skin at Ibubo. And I'll tell you why it is called Ibubo. I said it earlier. So in our discussion with the old man, he told us how and when the white man, I keep referring to them as the white man, came there. And these were the Germans, the first white man that was able to reach or invade or infiltrate in the Konkomba land. He said around 1885, 86 that way. I do not know the precise year. He didn't know either. But around that time, and historians should be able to find that out, that a few white men arrived. He was by then 12 years old, according to his narrative. 12 years old boy. By the time we went there, he was over 100 years, I believe. But he was able to recount as a child what happened. So in that discussion, he said, a few white men came around the vicinity, today now known as Ibubo. They don't know what their intentions were, but they came with a few locals from the Kara area, whether they were Cabre, they were Airways, Portuguese with them. They had settled there for a while, and so they were able to create missionary work in terms of schools, and those people in that area were able to understand them. So they had come down with them, and they were riding horses. He said as soon as the white men arrived, our people do not wait to see what they were going to say, because they had heard stories of different people. That is, if I say different people, different color, that had invaded other communities in the south or somewhere nearby and had captured people in the past and took them away in the form of slaves. So they were not going to wait. And so they attacked the white man and his men, and were able to kill some of the locals that came with the white men, the Germans. So the Germans were able to retreat very fast back to their camp near Kara. And they were able to relay a message to Berlin. I don't know by what means, but they were able to communicate to them that when they got to that part of the land, they met a fierce resistant army. They don't know who they were, but they did not. And they had caused a lot of casualties by killing most of the locals that had gone with them. You see, so their bosses in Germany, the administrator, had regrouped and sent out more troops from Germany. I believe were the tactical men or the snipers, how they call it today, I don't know. And so according to the old man, they had trained a lot of locals to be the military men in that area of the region. And they were preparing to come down or advance and come back to our area where they had met that defeat. So they managed in a way to let our people know that they were coming back. And so our people had told everybody that that day everybody was going to get somebody to kill. Because fighting was not forbidden. You had to protect what you have. So according to him, he didn't go to the war front where today is called Ibubu. It was very small, 12 years. He couldn't have gone there. But most of our people went there, the Konkomba people. According to him, there were a lot of casualties, not on the side of the white man and his men, but on the side of the Konkombas. He said they killed a lot of our people. Our people did not get opportunity to face them because they were using bows and arrows. And by his narration, when I went later on to check, I realized that that was the first time a machine gun was used in the South region. Because he described that the type of gun that was used, according to those who were able to escape, had cut them from the knee level, the stomach, and the neck. So there was no way that any Konkomba man or warrior could face them. So you had to run away. And those that were spared were only laying on lowland areas or in the valleys. And so they were spared. Those that they did not kill, they captured them as prisoners of war and had taken them to their camps near in the Karai area that I mentioned, leaving the feeble, the aged, and the children. The young ones that escaped had gone and run away, far away from their villages. You know. So according to him, they had killed a lot of people, now known as Ibubo. But there was one gentleman, his name was Tunampaja, who was a hunter, but was not available at the time, according to him, that he had gone to where we call Jayondo area, Nachindi area. It was the bushy area, where it was in the form of a forest. He goes to kill the wild, and after having smoked them, he comes down to Tatale-Sangul to get the young men. They will go carry the meat and come and share to everybody, every community. It's not like today that everybody is independent. They were all together as one people. So he wasn't there. He could have been killed, or he would have run away. Not that he was too brave, no. He just wasn't available. So when he came down and heard that, he went to his village and all the young men were not there. Other villages, the same thing. He had to go to somebody they were called Otenda, that is a landlord of the area. He was a custodian of the fetish that they were worshiping. You know, and according to the old man, Otenda at that time was at today Nkpuntabo, the one that is between Lambong and Sangul and today. And according to him, they were Gasseti. That Otenda was Ogaseja. So Tenampaja went to him, and he also told him what he has heard and what his man told him. So there were still dead bodies laying at today Ibubo. So Tenampaja suggested that he had also heard that some of the young men that were not killed were taken with the white man and the people down to Kara area. So he intended to go and look for them. Since he was a hunter, he might find them. Maybe they were not killed. Utinda agreed with him and suggested that they should bury the dead first before he leaves. Yes, and they went to all the villages, brought people. And why it is called Ibubu is that Ibubu means holes. In actual fact, when people, now that people are being buried there or were buried there, it will tend to be like graves. But in an actual sense, it's holes or wells. That's how it is the name in Lupapa, Ibubu. but it is graves because people were buried there. So wherever they reach, where there was a dead body, they just have to dig because it was rotting. They just have to dig, and then they bury it. I sorry I did not forewarn you that this will be emotional. This will be pathetic, but we have hidden this story far too long that people do not know what Konkombas encountered and what we have lost. And so I will plead that you put emotions aside and listen to the true story. So after the burial, Tinampaja came back to Utinda, who took him to the shrine and fortified him and asked him to go and may his wishes be granted. When he went to the camp there, he had walked 3 months according to those people that he went and rescued. He went and negotiated for their release. They came back to tell the story because he wouldn't say anything. He had gone there, met a white man, and through the mediators that they were able to communicate because most of the locals were now, they were not able to speak the white man's language. So he made it clear that he comes from where that war ensued, and he had come for his men. It was tense, but they agreed, and he released them to them. And he told him to inform the elders back at Tobal that he was not coming there for war, but his big men in court in Berlin wanted him to come on a mission to open schools, development, and missions in terms of Christianity or whatever. So he gave the man to him and told him that when he gets there, he knows he will be there in 3 months. He will come down there and then he will negotiate. But he will be communicating to the people through him. So in short, he just made him the liaison officer in the area, comprising of those areas I mentioned, from today, Kuka, Toba, all the way to wherever you can think of, not including Chabo area. Sabuba area was not included because you had to cross the River Oti. So he did not have control over that side. So the white man actually followed up, and they agreed that he would be the liaison officer. See, that's how chieftaincy started in that area. It wasn't German Togoland yet, because it was going to be colonized, or however you call it, but it wasn't done yet. By that time, the Germans were aware that they were targeted. The First World War was just brewing. It was getting too close to over 1900s. And so they know that Great Britain and France on one side were going after Germany, and which was going to be known as the First World War. So they had moved quickly to establish themselves so that they could recruit some of the locals. And they knew Konkombas, the encounter that they saw the first time, they know they were brave. So they were eager to recruit some of the young men into the military. But they were so traumatized that most of them did not want to go. So now, the Tinampajar guy was now controlling the area in the form of the indirect rule that British introduced in the South before. That's the same way they also started. So whatever information they had gotten from Berlin, they also relayed it to him, and he would tell the Konkombas around the area, all the way to Kuka. So it became a frequent affair, where he suggested to the white man that Konkombas do not deal with a centralized system. They have their elders in the various communities that they listen to, and between them as well. So since the messages were now very frequent and the communal work was now very frequent, he was suggesting that he was going to delegate some of the authority to some of the clan elders to also control, and when he sends the message, they also spread to their people. So he first nominated Inab from Bedondom area of the clan, where I say Inab do, na huyile, na nyujado. It was Inab do. And he gave him that authority to take care of the Bedondom area and their related families. Then he went to Nawar That chieftain was not at Kuka like it is today. It was at Nawar. He chose Bilfa. Either he was from the Maltip clan or Pajotip, and gave him that authority to control that area. And he came down to Taguando, also nominated Taguan, who was Okanjoja of the clan, to also take care of Okanjo, and they are related and they are affiliates. Every Konkomba knows how we are grouped. That chieftain or the head was not at Nandetab today as it is called. It was at Taguando. So in all, he nominated 3, and he, Tenampaja, held the Tobas king, which is now known as Sangul. You see? So there was decentralization. Not like today, somebody will claim that they introduced decentralization. We do know that already, and we were practicing it, even long before the white man came and the chieftaincy started. Now, since the agitation were too much and there was pressure on the Tenampaja to give them the men to be recruited in the German army, he had no choice. Then he gave his son, one of his sons, the elder one, of course, who was known as Jamboja, Tenampaja. And he was recruited into the then German army. And he fought alongside the Germans in the First World War. Whether he actually went to the war front or he was stationed backwards at their headquarters, I cannot tell. That he was a military man with the German army around the 1914s. See, so during that war that there was encounter, Germany was defeated. But then they had established what they now call the German Togoland in our area. See, and some part of Africa that I'm not aware of, though I'm aware of, but I don't have details. So when they were defeated, France and Great Britain had to petition or divide or demarcate the lands that the Germans were occupying, including where we are or where we were, so that part of it will go to British Togoland and part will go to French Togoland, now Togo. And the other one was Gold Coast, which became Ghana. So by this introduction, you know where I'm going. I told you that where there's the need to criticize our war. All this while, I have not mentioned our brothers, the Konkombas, enough, because by then we do not know them. We do not know them. We were not under anybody. We were not looking for anything under the Konkombas. So we are not going to sit here and say we fought the Konkombas and so on. So there was no that friction between us because there was nothing in common that we were agitating for. We were just neighbors, and they are very good people. People should not get it wrong. The only crime that they did was that during that demarcation, where that treaty was finalized, where they had to take over our colony, the German colony, and petition, that was where they came in. And that took all the way to 1928, which I'm going to tell you about. You see, so when the Germans were defeated, the land was now fallow because it was the treaty had not been finalized for the British and France to petition that German Togoland, where we were part. You see, so it was now fallow. The Jamboja guy had now returned as a force retired military officer. And by then the father had died, and he had taken control as the chief of Toba. Nab was still there at Nab do Nahu Yili Nujado today. Belfan was still there at where I called earlier Nawar. And Taguan was still at Taguando. Two of those kings, the one that was at Taguando is now at Nandutab, today in Togo. The one that was at Nawar is at Kuka, today in Togo. That of Sangul is still in, Tobal is still in Sangul itself. There's a conflict, I'm not going to go there. And that of Nabdo, Nyojado, is still there. So who told who that we do not have lands or we do not have chiefs? We did. You know, so when the treaty had been finalized between the French and the British, they had now come down to partition where we now call today Sangul. So that part of that place will become what we call the French Togoland, and where we are today will become the British Togoland, which will be added to Gold Coast. You see, so recently when I heard the separatists in the Western Togoland demanding that they be accorded their piece of land on authority and independence, people were making all sort of noise that they did not have a legitimate claim. Who told you? They do. They do, because they were tired of being called aliens or strangers on their own land and not being Ghanaians, just like we are being called. They say we are Togolese, we are not Ghanaians. But in actual fact, I made it clear that there was no Togoland, there was no French Togoland, there was no German Togoland, and there was no British Togoland. So we had those lands, and we occupied them, and we are still occupying them today. So based on artificial boundaries that were created as a result of the white man's invasion, then we now be termed to be strangers on our own land. And you want us to be happy. So I support the idea that they were bringing forward, just that the way they were doing it is what I will not advocate for. Because that colony or that part of the Western Togoland was a trust land. The historians and the scholars will tell you, I don't have that expertise in that, but I do know because ours was part. It was a trust territory entrusted to the Gold Coast to manage. It was not as if it was agreed that it become part of Gold Coast and now Ghana. And if it did, then there should be a discussion to formally integrate them into Ghana. And if there were any compensation, they should be paid. So that was the reason why they were agitating. It's just that they didn't put it in the right way. I wouldn't agitate that the former German Togoland or the Western Togoland become a separate country. I wouldn't say that, because where are we going to start from? But it was enough for them to agitate for their freedom and to be recognized. Just like we are tired of being called Togolese. Konkombas are. They are very tired. And so when people do not listen to us, they just feel that we are warmongers or we try to create trouble. Who will not create trouble when their lands were forcefully put administratively in the hands of the Konkombas? The Konkombas didn't do anything wrong. They didn't conquer Konkombas in any war, and we haven't fought any wars, apart from the starting of 1981 wars, which started in Bimbla, and all the way to 94 and whatnot. We don't want to recount that. Nobody's advocating for war. And nobody is advocating that the lands that were perceived to be Konkomba lands, like Yajol, which is Zabzugu, Yanle, Chal, formerly of Chal, and now Yanle and Isiyendi. We are not agitating that somebody is going to go back and claim those lands. Historians have made it clear what they were. You know, but where we have occupied, and we are still occupying, that we do not want anybody, no matter who that is, whether the government, the Yana, or whoever, to stretch and claim those lands. And those form of commissions, and the baby commissions like that of the Tatale-Sangul committee or commission, they were baby committees. We were there before those committees were born, or commissions were born, and they should not tell us what our lands should be who our land should be put under or managed by. We can manage our own lands. We don't carry lands on our heads. And so we demand that those commissions be abolished. In the 1940s, confiscation of our lands and property put in the hands of the Konkombas should be reversed. And I'm telling the Konkombas scholars that we have to go to court. I know they are not binding because nobody is going to come to where we live to claim anything. But just that formally, those things should be resolved. If we say Ghana is independent, we need our independence and freedom. I'll come to that, but I'm just, with the purposes of the time, I wouldn't go too much. See, on the next sector, I'll be going much into the policies. So like I said, we had control to the extent that in 1928, and I'm saying this, that's why I say you people should put emotions aside, because there are emotional events, or there were emotional events that people never heard, that we have hidden it. That was why the Konkomba story was never told. For example, where we call Matong today, which is part of the Tatale-Sangul, Matong, it was Matong, it's still Matong, it was called Lugungulumbo, it's still Lugungulumbo. So you can call it Matong, Lugungulumbo, or anything, it's still there. See, the chief surveyor that was brought by the British to demarcate the land between them and French Togo, or the France, or the French people, however you call them, was killed there. His name was T.S. Kwashi. He was from La, Accra. All along, before we grew up, or we were growing up, they told us that he was a white man. No, he was no white man. He was a Gaman from La, where they call Labadi, Accra. And T.S. Kwashi family, if you are listening, I have the documents. Maybe nobody had told you what happened to your loved one. Whether compensations were paid, I do not know. If they weren't, you have to go after it, whether from the then British government or now Ghana government, whichever way is appropriate. Because he was the chief surveyor in charge of the survey party. Before I get to that Jamboja guy who had retired from the German army was now the chief of Toba, now Sangul. But because of the friction, there was tension, because they had brought men from the south, mostly the Ghana people who were in charge of survey. They were survey party. If I say survey, we call them surveyors. I don't know how the expertise, whether the architects, surveyors, whatever they call them, to demarcate the land. And the chief surveyor was T.S. Kwashi. He died on 17th December, 1928. His grave is located just a few minutes or few kilometers after Tatalo. That's where he was buried. He was killed at Matong, now today Lugungulumbo. That was where he was stationed to do the demarcation with a whole lot of laborers. So before then, there was agitation. There was confrontation between Konkombas and the laborers that were doing the job. And they thought because the Jambojo guy had come from the military, they thought he was the problem. That was when the British had to take him away from the people, because whatever he said, the people were going to follow. So they thought taking him away was going to serve something good. And because of his experience, there was nothing you can do to him. So they had to integrate him into the Gold Coast Constabulary, known as the Gold Coast Police. His service number was 1015. 1015. And that's, he served under Yendi and Tamale. So they thought it was a ploy to take him away so that he will not have that opportunity to talk to his people where they can group together and prevent the survey party so that they could carry on the work. But he came home each time he had a vacation. Our people used to call it Lifo. And he comes home to his people. So on that day, the 17th December, 1928, he had come down for New Year activities, and he was going to spend that with his family at home at Toba, Maton area. It was alleged that the chief surveyor, T.S. Kwashi's wife, was there, who was also pregnant. That's what I told you. It's going to be emotional. But I do not want people to rely on the emotional aspect, so that they should not think that Konkombas were just people from somewhere that do not have a history. In the quest to take our lands and to put us forcefully under somebody's authority, it cost lives. Lives of Konkombas and life of non-Konkombas, including T.S. Kwashi and his wife and their unborn baby. That's the true story. And if Kwashi family is listening, very shortly, or in short, I'm going to put my number up there, my information. You contact me, I have the documents. I'll give you. See? And he wanted pork. So they had gone to, he gave his laborers money, I called them boys. They went to somewhere at Wabini near Maton. And the guy was selling his pig. They bought it. When they got home, the woman alleged that it was not fatty enough for her. So the boys had to go back to the same man and grab, led by the woman, they grabbed a pig that was also pregnant. They killed it in his presence. For security reasons, I was not going to mention his name, but it's a long time. He's gone. He's dead and gone. His siblings are gone too. His name was Yayon. 3 of his siblings, I will reserve the 2. I'll mention the other one. His other one was Faline. So Yayon, seeing that they killed that pig in his presence, went to his room, took his arrow and everything, and bow, and followed the group to the tent. His brothers, including the Faline that I told you, also said they will not allow their elder brother to remain in the fight. So they followed him up, and they stood there and shot arrows into the tent. 17 of the arrows had squash, and some had his wife and the unborn baby. They all died. The wife was buried at the Yendi hospital with the unborn baby. T.S. Kwashi was buried just after Tatalo. Changboja was the chief of Toba. 17th December, 1928. See how emotional that is? Or that was? And you think Konkombas were happy? They were not. They were intimidated to the extent that they had to fight back. This is what it took to deprive Konkombas of our land. We were not under the Gomesa, as I said earlier. You see? So, for the purposes of this video, I am going to limit it here, and I will continue the story from there and tell people how and when we became, or our authority now fell under the One Traditional Council in another episode. And like I said, my phone number is 973-517-2577. 973-517-2577. My email address is mbayi@msn.com. mbayi@msn.com. So it's MBANYE. You can reach out to me for a discussion or any information that you want. This is part 1. Part 2 will follow in due course. This same video will be replicated in Lopapa. Lopapa know their story. They don't need that because they do know the story. But I'll tell it to the young ones. Thank you, and we'll meet again in part 2. This is Peter Bajo.